In the hot silence of a random morning, a mother pushes a stroller along an empty sidewalk until the child suddenly stops, staring at an abandoned post. Among branches and twisted cables, a German shepherd bleeds, motionless, wrapped in metal wires. The dog struggles to breathe as flies swirl around its injured snout. Without warning, the baby slips out of the stroller, walks up to the dog, and extends a tiny hand to touch its bloody face. The animal, barely conscious, licks the child's fingers. The video of the scene spreads within minutes. What happens next made even adults cry. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for being with us. Now, back to our story. The day began like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Maple Creek, a modest suburb of Portland, Oregon, where the daily comings and goings were rarely interrupted by anything beyond birdsong and the shuffling of feet on aging asphalt. Sarah Mitchell, a single mother of two, pushed a stroller along the uneven sidewalk while her 3-year-old son, Ethan, walked beside her with still uncertain steps. His round face peered curiously at everything they passed, a stark contrast to Sarah's distracted expression as she scrolled through job listings on her phone. Nothing indicated that this would be a day worth remembering, until baby Emma, just 10 months old, suddenly stopped fussing and stared intently at something hidden behind dry branches and the metal skeleton of an old power pole. At first, Sarah didn't notice what had caught her daughter's attention. Absorbed in her phone and the worry of overdue bills, she continued walking for several more steps before realizing that Ethan had stopped following her. When she turned around, she found him pointing insistently at the tangle of wires and metal. "Ethan, honey, we need to keep moving. I have that interview at 2, Sarah called, checking the time on her phone. But her son remained frozen, still pointing. Curious and somewhat apprehensive, Sarah approached, careful to keep the stroller on the smoother part of the sidewalk. As she drew closer to the spot that had captured her children's attention, she finally saw it. Between abandoned cables, remnants of burned plastic, and accumulated garbage lay a German shepherd of impressive size, but completely defeated. Its coat was stained with dried blood, and its sunken eyes conveyed pain and a silent plea for help. Sarah dropped her phone into her pocket and stood motionless for several moments. It was difficult to understand how an animal of that size had ended up there, invisible to so many passers-by in this neighborhood where everyone claimed to know everything about their neighbors. "Doggy hurt," Ethan whispered, his voice small but concerned. Emma squirmed in her stroller, reaching her chubby hand toward the animal. The dog, though weak, raised its muzzle and gently licked the baby's pudgy fingers. That simple exchange broke Sarah's hesitation. In an impulse, she took out her phone and recorded the scene. "Oh my God," she muttered, her voice catching. "We need to get help." She quickly shared the video in the local neighborhood group with an urgent plea for assistance. Within minutes, dozens of messages appeared. Some offered advice, others promised to come immediately, and a few questioned why. She didn't simply call animal control and be done with it, but Sarah couldn't just walk away. Something about the way Emma and the dog connected held her in place, despite the time ticking down to her job interview. A group of volunteers arrived sooner than expected. They were led by Jessica Thompson, a young veterinary assistant with firm speech and tired eyes who lived just 2 blocks away. "I brought some water and basic supplies," Jessica said, kneeling beside the dog. "Poor thing is dehydrated and has several wounds, but I don't think anything is broken." The dog, despite being debilitated, kept its eyes fixed on baby Emma, as if that gave it some purpose. The baby giggled, reaching toward the animal from a stroller. "Has anyone called animal control?" Sarah asked, checking her phone again. The interview was important. It was for a position at the local community college that would finally use her teaching degree and offer benefits. Something her current retail job lacked. "I did," Jessica answered, carefully examining the dog. "But they're backed up today, said it could be hours." As they tended to the animal, a neighbor approached. Mr. Grayson, an elderly man who'd lived on the street for decades, hobbled toward them with his cane. "I know that dog," he said, adjusting his glasses to get a better look. "That's old Frank Thompson's dog, Apollo, I think he calls him." "Frank Thompson?" Jessica repeated, looking up with sudden interest. "Lives up on Cedar Street," Mr. Grayson continued. "Been in the hospital for about a week now. Had a bad fall at home, didn't know. His dog was missing, though." Sarah frowned. "How did the dog end up here? Cedar Street is at least 5 blocks away." Mr. Grayson shrugged. "Can't say. Frank lives alone since his wife passed. Maybe someone was supposed to watch the dog and didn't do a good job of it." The conversation was interrupted when more volunteers arrived with a makeshift stretcher. Together, they carefully lifted Apollo onto it. The dog whimpered but didn't resist. Sarah noticed how his eyes kept finding Emma, who was now bouncing excitedly in her stroller, hands outstretched toward her new friend. "We'll take him to Riverside Animal Clinic," Jessica said. "I work there, and Dr. Martinez is expecting us." Sarah checked the time again and sighed. "I wish I could come with you, but I have a job interview in 40 minutes. "Go to your interview," Jessica reassured her. "I'll update the neighborhood group with his progress." As the volunteers carried Apollo away, Ethan tugged at Sarah's hand. "Mummy, can we visit Doggy later?" Sarah hesitated. She hadn't planned on getting involved beyond calling for help. Her life was complicated enough, raising 2 kids on her own after her husband had left them for a new life in California, working a job that barely covered the bills, and trying to finish her teaching certification online. A dog, especially, one that belonged to someone else, wasn't part of the plan. But then Emma began to cry, reaching her arms toward the departing group carrying Apollo. It was the most animated Sarah had seen her daughter in weeks. "We'll see, honey," she finally answered Ethan. "Let's go home and get Mommy ready for her interview first." As they walked away, Sarah couldn't help but look back one last time. Something about the scene they'd just encountered felt unfinished, as if their part in this story was just beginning. Later that evening, after a promising interview and a quick dinner of macaroni and cheese, Sarah checked her phone to find that her video had spread far beyond the neighborhood group. It had been shared hundreds of times, with local news outlets beginning to pick it up. The comment section overflowed with people touched by the moment between baby Emma and Apollo. "Did you see this?" her sister Lauren texted, attaching a link to a local news website that had featured the video. "My sister, the viral sensation." Sarah stared at the screen, watching as strangers commented about her daughter and the wounded German shepherd. Some were offering financial help for Apollo's medical care. Others were praising Emma's pure heart and Sarah's quick action. "Mommy, can we see Doggy tomorrow?" Ethan asked, climbing onto the couch beside her, his dinosaur pajamas slightly too big for his small frame. Sarah looked at her son's hopeful face, then at Emma, who was playing with blocks on the floor. Her daughter had been unusually quiet since they'd left Apollo, as if she sensed something important had happened. The weight of responsibility pressed on Sarah's shoulders. She had 2 children to care for, bills to pay, and a career to rebuild. Getting involved with a wounded dog that belonged to someone else was precisely the kind of complication she didn't need. Yet something about Apollo's eyes, the way he'd focused on Emma despite his pain, wouldn't leave her mind. It was as if, in that brief exchange, a connection had formed that transcended the ordinary. "Yes," Sarah finally said, surprising herself. We'll go see him tomorrow." She didn't know then how that simple decision would change everything, or that within the walls of Riverside Animal Clinic, a story was unfolding that would intertwine their lives in ways she could never have imagined. As Emma drifted to sleep that night, Sarah wondered about Frank Thompson, the man in the hospital who didn't know his beloved pet had been found, and what would happen when these separate worlds inevitably collided. The Riverside Animal Clinic was busier than usual the next morning when Sarah arrived with Ethan and Emma. The waiting room contained a mix of regular patients and curious locals who had seen the viral video and wanted to check on Apollo's progress. Sarah felt strangely self-conscious as heads turned and whispers followed her path to the reception desk. "You're the mum from the video," the receptionist said, recognition lighting her eyes. "Jessica told us you might come by. She's with Apollo. Now if you'd like to see him." Sarah nodded, adjusting Emma on her hip while keeping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Is that okay? We don't want to disturb his treatment." "Trust me, you're not disturbing anything," the receptionist assured her. "That dog perks up whenever Jessica mentions your baby. It's the strangest thing." They were led through a corridor, lined with examination rooms, to a recovery area in the back. Apollo lay on a large cushioned bed, his body cleaned of blood and dirt, with several bandages covering what Sarah assumed were the worst of his wounds. Jessica sat beside him, gently stroking his head. The moment Emma came into view, Apollo's ears pricked up and his tail thumped weakly against the bed. The transformation was immediate and striking. "See what I mean?" Jessica said, smiling as she stood to greet them. "He's been fairly despondent all night, but he responds to your daughter like nothing I've ever seen." Emma squirmed in Sarah's arms, reaching toward Apollo with excited babbles. Sarah hesitated, maternal instinct warring with the evident connection between her baby and the injured dog. "Is it safe?" she asked. Jessica nodded. "He's incredibly gentle. Dr. Martinez thinks he must have been around children before. Besides, he's too weak to do much, even if he wanted to." Carefully, Sarah lowered Emma to sit on the floor near Apollo's bed. The baby immediately placed her tiny hand on the dog's paw. Apollo responded by inching his head forward to lick her arm, causing Emma to giggle with delight. "Amazing," Dr. Martinez said, entering the room with a clipboard. "I've been working with animals for 20 years, and I've rarely seen this kind of immediate bond." The veterinarian, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, explained Apollo's condition. "He has several lacerations, likely from crawling through that debris where you found him. He's dehydrated and malnourished, suggesting he's been on his own for at least a few days. But the most concerning thing is the infection in his back leg. We've started him on antibiotics, but he'll need careful monitoring." "What about his owner?" Sarah asked. "The neighbor mentioned someone named Frank Thompson who's in the hospital." Dr. Martinez nodded. "We've been trying to get in touch with Portland General to confirm. If he's still hospitalized, we'll need to figure out what happens." To Apollo in the meantime, "I could help," Sarah offered before she could stop herself. The words surprised her as much as everyone else in the room. "I mean, just until his owner recovers. We have a fenced backyard." Jessica and Dr. Martinez exchanged glances. "That's very generous," the vet said, "but he'll need medication and special care for at least a week. Are you sure you can handle that with 2 small children?" The reasonable part of Sarah's brain screamed no. Her life was already a careful balancing act between work, childcare, and her online classes. Adding a wounded German shepherd to the mix was madness. But then Ethan, who had been quietly observing Apollo, looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Please, Mommy, we can help make Doggy better." Before Sarah could respond, the clinic door burst open, and a tall, well-dressed woman strode in, followed by a cameraman. "There they are!" she exclaimed. "The miracle baby and the rescued dog!" Dr. Martinez stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Excuse me, this is a private treatment area. You can't just barge in here with cameras." The woman extended her hand with practiced charm. "Melissa Warren, Channel 8 News. We're doing a human interest piece on the viral video. The community is absolutely captivated by this story." Sarah instinctively moved to shield Emma and Apollo from the camera. "We didn't agree to any interview." "Oh, but this is such an uplifting story," Melissa persisted. "A baby's connection with an injured dog, the power of social media bringing a community together. It's exactly what our viewers need right now." "Ms. Warren," Dr. Martinez said firmly, "if you want to cover this story, you'll need to schedule it properly through our clinic's administration. Right now, you're disturbing a patient." The reporter looked ready to argue, but seemed to think better of it when she noticed Jessica recording the intrusion on her phone. "Fine," she conceded, "but the offer stands. Human interest stories like this don't come along every day, and there could be compensation involved." After they left, Sarah exhaled slowly. "Is it always going to be like this now?" "The internet has a short attention span," Jessica reassured her. "But this story seems to be touching people in a special way. You might want to prepare for more attention." While they were talking, Emma had curled up against Apollo's side, her small body fitting perfectly in the curve of his. The dog had positioned himself protectively around her, his watchful eyes tracking everyone in the room. "Remarkable," Dr. Martinez murmured. "It's almost as if they've known each other in another life." The clinic door opened again, and Sarah tensed, expecting another reporter. Instead, an elderly nurse in hospital scrubs entered, looking around uncertainly. "I'm looking for the dog that was brought in yesterday, the German Shepherd." Jessica approached her. "That's Apollo. Are you from the hospital? Do you have information about Frank Thompson?" The nurse nodded. "I'm Rita Simmons. I've been Frank's nurse for the past week. He's been asking about Apollo non-stop, worried sick about him. When I saw the video on social media, I recognized the dog immediately." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for the unknown man. "How is Mr. Thompson doing?" Rita's expression softened. "He's stable, but recovery will be slow. He had a bad fall that resulted in a broken hip and some complications. At his age, it's not an easy fix. He's been more concerned about Apollo than himself." "Can we tell him Apollo is safe?" Sarah asked. "That's why I'm here," Rita said. "I'm off duty now, but I wanted to take some pictures to show Frank that his dog is being cared for. It might help his recovery to know Apollo is okay." As Rita took photos, she shared more about Frank Thompson. He was a retired high school music teacher, a widower of 15 years, with no children. Apollo had been his sole companion for the past 8 years. "Frank got him as a puppy after his retirement," Rita explained. "That dog is his whole world. They're inseparable. Frank even volunteers with Apollo at the Children's Hospital. They're part of a therapy dog program." Suddenly, Apollo's gentle behavior with Emma made perfect sense. He was accustomed to being around children, to providing comfort and connection. "Will Mr. Thompson be able to care for Apollo when he gets out of the hospital?" Sarah asked, the question weighing on her mind. Rita's hesitation told Sarah everything. Before she even spoke, "It's complicated. Frank will need physical therapy, possibly a live-in aid for a while. His house has stairs, which he won't be able to manage alone for some time, and he lives on a fixed income. The practical reality is that he might not be able to keep Apollo," Jessica finished quietly. The weight of this realization settled over the room. Sarah looked at Emma, still nestled against the dog's side, and at Ethan, who was carefully placing one of his toy dinosaurs next to Apollo's paw as an offering of friendship. "What will happen to Apollo then?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer would somehow involve her. "There are options," Dr. Martinez said carefully. "But given Apollo's age and his medical needs, finding the right home could be challenging." The unsaid suggestion hung in the air. Sarah felt the invisible threads of fate pulling tighter, drawing her family and this dog into a shared story that was unfolding with each passing moment. "I should get these photos back to Frank," Rita said, scrolling through the pictures on her phone. "He'll be so relieved, and I'll keep you updated on his condition." As Rita turned to leave, she paused at the door. "You know, in all my years of nursing, I've learned that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen by accident. What looks like chance at first often turns out to be something more profound." After she left, Sarah sat beside Emma and Apollo, watching their peaceful interaction. The baby had fallen asleep, one hand still resting on the dog's fur. Apollo's eyes met Sarah's, and in them she saw intelligence, gratitude, and something that looked remarkably like hope. Outside the recovery room, she could hear the buzz of conversation as more people arrived at the clinic, drawn by the story that was quickly becoming bigger than any of them had anticipated. What had begun as a simple act of kindness was evolving into something that would test Sarah's capacity for compassion and change the trajectory of multiple lives, including her own. Jessica touched her shoulder gently. "You don't have to decide anything today. Just know that whatever happens, you've already made a difference by stopping when others walked by." Sarah nodded, thinking about all the complications this situation presented, but also about the undeniable rightness she felt. Sitting here, watching her children and this wounded animal form a bond that defied easy explanation. Some choices in life came disguised as inconveniences, but revealed themselves as pivotal moments that defined who you were and what you valued. As Apollo's eyes drifted closed, his body curled protectively around Emma, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what Frank Thompson would say when he saw the photos of his beloved dog finding comfort in the arms of a baby he'd never met, and how their two separate worlds, brought together by chance and compassion, would navigate the challenging path ahead. 3 days after finding Apollo, Sarah's life had transformed in ways she couldn't have predicted. The video of Emma and the German Shepherd had accumulated over 2 million views, thrusting their family into an unexpected spotlight. Local news stations had run segments on the story, and offers of help poured in from across the country. A pet supply company had even sent a massive care package to the clinic, complete with premium dog food, beds, toys, and a note expressing interest in featuring Apollo and Emma in their upcoming campaign. But the most significant change was Apollo himself, who now occupied a corner of Sarah's living room. After careful consideration and lengthy discussions with Dr. Martinez, Sarah had agreed to foster the dog during his recovery. The clinic provided medical supplies, detailed instructions, and Jessica's personal cell number for emergencies. "He's doing much better today," Sarah told Jessica during their daily check-in call. She watched as Apollo lay on his new orthopedic bed, patiently allowing Ethan to read him a picture book about dinosaurs. The antibiotics seem to be working. The swelling in his leg has gone down considerably. "That's great news," Jessica replied. "And how's he adjusting to your home?" Sarah glanced around at the evidence of Apollo's integration into their lives, the water bowl in the kitchen, the medications lined up on the counter, the toys scattered across the floor. "Surprisingly well. It's like he's always been here." Katoom. Sarah didn't mention was how Apollo had already developed routines with each family member. He followed Ethan around during the day, listening attentively to the boys' endless chatter. He sat beside Sarah in the evenings as she studied, a comforting presence during late-night hours. But his most remarkable bond remained with Emma. The dog would position himself near her at all times, especially during her naps, as if appointed her personal guardian. "Any news about Mr. Thompson?" Sarah asked, changing Emma's diaper while keeping the phone wedged between her ear and shoulder. "Rita called this morning. He's making progress, but it's slower than they'd hoped. The infection in his hip is complicating things." Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for the man she'd never met. Has she shown him more pictures of Apollo? Every day. Apparently, it's the highlight of his recovery. She said he cried when he saw the photo of Apollo with Emma. After finishing the call, Sarah sat on the floor beside Apollo, gently checking his bandages as Dr. Martinez had taught her. The dog watched her with trusting eyes, occasionally leaning forward to lick her hand. "You're a good boy, aren't you?" she murmured. "No wonder Mr. Thompson loves you so much." The doorbell rang, causing Apollo to lift his head but not bark. His calm reaction to visitors had been another surprise. He was perfectly trained, responding to basic commands and displaying impeccable manners that spoke to Mr. Thompson's dedication. Sarah opened the door to find Rita Simmons standing on her porch, still wearing scrubs. "I hope I'm not intruding," the nurse said. "I just finished my shift and wanted to see how Apollo is doing in person. Frank asks for updates constantly." "Of course, come in." Sarah stepped aside, noticing the flash of recognition in Apollo's eyes as Rita entered. The dog attempted to stand, his tail wagging enthusiastically. "Stay, Apollo," Sarah said gently. "Your leg still needs rest." To her relief, Apollo settled back down, though his eyes remained fixed on Rita, perhaps searching for his owner behind. He looks so much better," Rita observed, kneeling to greet the dog. "Frank will be thrilled." As Rita examined Apollo and took new photos, Sarah prepared coffee for them both. When she returned to the living room, she found Emma had awakened from her nap and was sitting on the floor beside Apollo, her small hand patting his fur with the deliberate concentration only babies possess. "They really are amazing together," Rita said, capturing the moment with her phone. "Frank couldn't believe it when I showed him the first pictures. He said Apollo has always been good with children. They volunteer at the pediatric ward every Thursday, but he's never seen him form such an immediate attachment." Sarah settled on the couch, watching Emma and Apollo. "I've been wondering about that. Why did Apollo end up in that ditch? If Mr. Thompson has been in the hospital for over a week, who was supposed to be caring for Apollo?" Rita's expression darkened. "That's actually something Frank has been upset about. His neighbor Gerald was supposed to be checking on Apollo twice a day. Gerald claimed Apollo must have slipped out when he was filling his food bowl, but Frank doesn't believe it. Apollo is too well trained to just run off." "So how did he end up 5 blocks away, injured and hidden under debris?" Rita hesitated. "Frank thinks, well, he suspects Gerald might have been neglecting his duties, maybe coming once a day instead of twice or not at all. He found out yesterday that Gerald is planning a move to Arizona next month. He's been busy preparing his house for sale." "That's terrible," Sarah said, feeling a surge of anger toward the unknown neighbor. "Apollo could have—" She stopped herself, aware of Ethan listening nearby. "He could have been hurt much worse." "Exactly," Rita agreed. "Frank is beside himself about it. Apollo means everything to him." A moment of uncomfortable silence fell between them, the unspoken question of Apollo's future hanging in the air. Sarah had been trying not to think about it, focusing instead on the dog's recovery. But each day that passed strengthened the bonds between Apollo and her children, making the inevitable separation more difficult to imagine. "Frank wanted me to give you this," Rita said finally, pulling an envelope from her purse. He dictated it to me yesterday. Sarah accepted the envelope, noting her name written in an unfamiliar, slightly shaky handwriting. Should I read it now? If you'd like. Frank just wanted to express his gratitude. Sarah opened the letter carefully and began to read. Dear Ms. Mitchell, words cannot express my gratitude for what you have done for Apollo. When I learned he was missing, I feared the worst. The thought of him alone and suffering while I was confined to this hospital bed was unbearable. You have given me the greatest gift, knowing that Apollo is safe and cared for. Rita has shown me the pictures of Apollo with your children, especially your baby daughter. In my 8 years with Apollo, I have seen him connect with many children through our therapy work, but never like this. There seems to be a special bond forming that touches my heart deeply. I must be honest with you, my recovery is not proceeding as quickly as I had hoped. The doctors tell me I will need several months of rehabilitation, followed by significant adjustments to my home, before I can properly care for myself, let alone Apollo. This reality weighs heavily on my heart. Apollo has been my faithful companion through the loneliest years of my life after losing my dear wife, Margaret. The thought of being separated from him permanently is almost too painful to bear, and yet I must consider what is best for him. Rita tells me how wonderfully you are caring for him, how he has integrated into your family's life. I can see in the photos that he is happy with you and your children. I am writing to ask if we might meet when I am able to leave the hospital even briefly. I would like to thank you in person and discuss Apollo's future with clarity and openness. Whatever happens, I want you to know that you have my eternal gratitude and respect. Sincerely, Franklin Thompson. Sarah folded the letter carefully, emotion tightening her throat. The dignified sadness in Mr. Thompson's words, his obvious love. And for Apollo and the impossible choice he was facing, it all struck her deeply. He's a remarkable man, Rita said softly. Taught music at Portland High for over 30 years, still plays the piano beautifully. The nurses love when he's feeling well enough to use the old piano in the recreation room. Sarah watched as Apollo gently nudged Emma's hand when she stopped, petting him, causing the baby to giggle and resume her attention. Ethan had curled up against the dog's other side, quietly showing him pictures in his book. When might he be able to visit? Sarah asked. The doctors are considering a brief, supervised outing next week if his condition continues to improve. It would only be for an hour or so. The thought of meeting Frank Thompson filled Sarah with a mixture of anticipation and dread. How would it feel to meet the man whose beloved companion had become so intertwined with her own family? What would it be like to discuss who should keep Apollo, knowing that any decision would cause pain to someone? Tell him I'd be honored to meet him, Sarah said finally. Any day next week would work for us. After Rita left, Sarah sat beside Apollo, absently stroking his fur while Emma napped against his side. The dog looked up at her with soulful eyes that seemed to understand the complexity of the situation. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. Sarah could hear the neighborhood children playing, lawnmowers humming, and the distant sound of traffic. The normal rhythms of life continuing while inside her home, an extraordinary story was unfolding. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Jessica had tagged her in another post about Apollo, this one shared by a national animal rescue organization, highlighting the power of connection between a baby and a wounded dog. The comments section overflowed with emotional responses, many people sharing their own stories of animal rescues and meaningful bonds. Sarah scrolled through the comments, struck by how many strangers were now invested in Apollo's story. Their story, what had begun as a chance encounter, had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond their small corner of Portland. As the evening drew in, Sarah prepared dinner one-handed, her other arm holding Emma, who refused to be separated from Apollo. For long, the dog watched from his bed, alert to every movement in the kitchen, already attuned to the family's routines. "Do you think Mr. Thompson will let us keep Apollo?" Ethan asked suddenly, setting plates on the table with careful concentration. Sarah paused, unsure how to answer. The honest response that she didn't know, that it wasn't entirely their decision to make, seemed inadequate in the face of her son's hopeful expression. "I think," she said finally, "that Mr. Thompson loves Apollo very much and will want what's best for him. We'll have to see what that means when we meet him." Ethan nodded, processing this non-answer with surprising maturity. "If he takes Apollo back, can we still visit him sometimes?" "I'm sure we could arrange that," Sarah said, her heart aching at the thought of saying goodbye to the dog who had so quickly become part of their family. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Sarah sat on the porch steps with Apollo. Beside her, his head resting on her lap. The neighborhood was quiet, just the occasional car passing on the street. "What am I going to do about you?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. The dog sighed contentedly, seemingly unbothered by the complicated human emotions swirling around him. Sarah thought about Frank Thompson, alone in his hospital room, missing the companion who had been his solace after losing his wife. She thought about her children, already so attached to Apollo, and she thought about herself, how this unexpected detour in her carefully planned life had awakened something she hadn't realized was dormant, a capacity for opening her heart when it seemed she had nothing left to give. As the stars appeared overhead, Sarah realized that whatever happened next would require grace and compassion from everyone involved. The story that had begun with a chance encounter on a sidewalk was approaching a crossroads, and the path forward would depend on what they all valued most. Not just what they wanted for themselves, but what they were willing to sacrifice for those they loved. A week passed, transforming Sarah's modest Portland home into a hub of activity. Apollo's health improved daily under her careful attention. His wounds were healing well, and he'd begun putting weight on his injured leg again, much to Dr. Martinez's satisfaction during his home visit checkup. The German Shepherd had fully integrated into their family routine, becoming a steadying presence in their previously chaotic lives. "He even reminds me when it's time for Emma's bottle," Sarah told her sister Lauren during their weekly video call. "It's like having a furry alarm clock." Lauren laughed. "Sounds like you've got yourself a nanny dog. How's the fame treating you?" Sarah rolled her eyes. While their viral moment had mostly faded from the broader public's attention, it had left lasting ripples. The local news had done a follow-up piece on Apollo's recovery, and an animal welfare non-profit had asked if they could feature their story in an upcoming fundraising campaign. Sarah had agreed, hoping it might inspire others to stop and help when they encountered animals in need. "We're managing. The attention is already dying down, thankfully." What Sarah didn't mention was the nagging worry about Frank Thompson's upcoming visit. Rita had confirmed it for tomorrow afternoon, is a brief, supervised outing from the hospital to meet Sarah and see Apollo. The event loomed in Sarah's mind, a bittersweet milestone that could change everything. After ending the call, Sarah joined Ethan and Emma in the backyard where they were playing with Apollo. The dog moved carefully but with increasing confidence. Retrieving the soft ball, Ethan gently tossed and bringing it back with dignified precision. "Look, Mummy, Apollo can fetch," Ethan exclaimed, his face alight with pride as if he'd personally taught the dog this skill. "He's very good at it," Sarah agreed, settling on the grass with Emma. The baby immediately crawled toward Apollo, who lowered himself to the ground to meet her at eye level. Their mutual fascination remained undiminished. The peaceful scene was interrupted by the doorbell. Apollo's ears perked up, but he remained beside Emma, seemingly reluctant to leave his self-appointed charge, even for a moment. "I'll get it," Sarah said, lifting Emma and heading inside. "Come on, guys, break time." She opened the front door to find Jessica standing on the porch, her expression unusually tense. Behind her was a police officer, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Jessica, what's going on?" Sarah asked, instinctively holding Emma closer. "I'm so sorry to show up like this," Jessica said quickly. "This is Officer Daniels. He's here about Apollo." The officer nodded politely. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint regarding the German Shepherd you've been fostering." Sarah frowned. "A complaint? From whom?" "A couple named Patricia and Robert Henderson. They claim to be relatives of Franklin Thompson and say the dog legally belongs to them." The names meant nothing to Sarah. In all the conversations with Rita about Frank Thompson, no relatives had ever been mentioned. "This is the first I'm hearing of any relatives. Mr. Thompson is still in the hospital, and we've been in regular contact with his nurse." The Hendersons presented documentation showing they're Mr. Thompson's cousins, Officer Daniels explained. "They've filed a formal request for the dog to be returned to them as Mr. Thompson's next of kin." Sarah felt a chill run through her. Apollo isn't some piece of property to be claimed. He's recovering from serious injuries, and Mr. Thompson himself knows he's with us. We're scheduled to meet with him tomorrow. "I understand this is complicated," the officer said, his tone softening. "I'm not here to take the dog. This is just a preliminary inquiry based on their complaint." Jessica stepped forward. "I came along because I thought you might need someone familiar with the situation. The Hendersons showed up at the clinic this morning demanding information about Apollo. They were insistent." Sarah invited them inside, where Apollo had positioned himself in the living room doorway, alert but calm. Ethan stood beside him, one hand protectively on the dog's back. "Is something wrong, Mommy?" he asked, his eyes darting between the four strangers and Sarah. "Everything's fine, sweetie," Sarah assured him. "Why don't you take Emma to play in her room for a bit? Apollo can stay with me." Once the children were upstairs, Sarah sat with Jessica and Officer Daniels in the living room. Apollo settled at her feet, his warm presence a comfort amid the unsettling conversation. "These Hendersons," Sarah began, "did they explain why they're only coming forward now?" "Apollo was missing for days before we found him, and he's been with us for over a week." Officer Daniels consulted his notes. According to their statement, they were out of town and only recently learned about Mr. Thompson's hospitalization and the situation with his dog. They live in Seattle and claim they're preparing to take Mr. Thompson into their care upon his release. "That's strange," Jessica interjected. "Rita has never mentioned any family planning to care for Frank. In fact, she's been helping him look into assisted living options for his recovery period." Sarah stroked Apollo's head, feeling his solid warmth against her leg. "Has anyone actually confirmed with Mr. Thompson that these people are his family, or that he wants them to take Apollo?" "That's a fair question," Officer Daniels acknowledged. "The Hendersons provided documentation of their relationship, but I'm not aware of direct confirmation from Mr. Thompson himself." I think we should talk to Rita immediately," Jessica suggested, "and possibly postpone tomorrow's visit until we sort this out." Sarah shook her head. "No, I think the visit is more important than ever now. Mr. Thompson should know what's happening and have a say in it." After Officer Daniels left, with a promise to follow up after speaking with the hospital, Jessica stayed behind to help Sarah process this unexpected development. "I did some quick research while the officer was talking," Jessica said, showing Sarah her phone. "I found Patricia Henderson on social media. Look at this post from 3 months ago." Sarah read the public post, which detailed the couple's plans to sell their Seattle home and relocate to Arizona for retirement. This matches what Rita said about Mr. Thompson's neighbor Gerald moving to Arizona. Could there be a connection? It's worth looking into, Jessica agreed. And there's something else that bothers me. If they're really Frank's cousins who care about his welfare, why haven't they visited him in the hospital? Rita has never mentioned them. The sound of Emma crying upstairs pulled Sarah away momentarily. When she returned carrying her daughter, she found Jessica on the phone with Rita, her expression growing increasingly concerned. Rita says she's never heard Frank mention any cousins named Henderson, Jessica reported after ending the call. She's going to ask him directly and call us back. Emma squirmed in Sarah's arms, reaching toward Apollo. The dog watched attentively, tail wagging when Sarah sat down and allowed the baby to touch his fur. What do the Hendersons want with Apollo? Sarah wondered aloud. If they're moving to Arizona, why take on an elderly dog that belongs to a distant relative? Jessica's phone rang, interrupting their speculation. Rita's voice came through clearly on speakerphone, her usual calm demeanor noticeably shaken. Frank is extremely upset, she reported. He says Patricia Henderson is indeed his second cousin, but they've had no contact for over a decade. He specifically does not want Apollo going to them under any circumstances. Did he explain why? Sarah asked. He said Patricia and her husband expressed interest in Apollo years ago. Apparently, he's a purebred with an exceptional lineage. Frank always refused because he didn't like the way Robert Henderson treated animals. He suspects they're interested in Apollo for breeding purposes, despite his age. The pieces began to fall into place. So they're not actually interested in caring for Mr. Thompson at all, Sarah concluded. Absolutely not, Rita confirmed. Frank was shocked at the suggestion. He's never discussed his care plans with them. After the call ended, Sarah and Jessica sat in troubled silence, Apollo still vigilant at their feet. The situation had suddenly become more complicated than either of them had anticipated. What happens now? Sarah finally asked. I think we need to document everything, Jessica advised. Frank's explicit statement that he doesn't want the Hendersons to have Apollo is crucial, and we should probably consult with the clinic's lawyer tomorrow before the visit. Later that evening, after Jessica had left and the children were in bed, Sarah sat on the floor beside Apollo's bed, her mind racing with concerns about the Hendersons' claim and what it might mean for everyone involved. Her phone chimed with a message from Rita. Frank is determined to see you and Apollo tomorrow, despite doctors advising against it. He says it's more important than ever now. Attached was a photo of a handwritten note from Frank Thompson. Ms. Mitchell, please do not worry about my cousin's claims. Apollo is my companion, not their property. I look forward to meeting you tomorrow and finding the best solution for everyone, especially Apollo. With gratitude, Franklin Thompson. The simple dignity of the note brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She looked at Apollo, who gazed back with serene trust, unaware of the human complications swirling around him. We'll figure this out, she promised him, gently running her hand along his healed flank. One way or another. The next morning brought chaos. Sarah was preparing the children for Frank's visit when Jessica called with alarming news. The Hendersons showed up at the clinic demanding to see Apollo's medical records, she reported breathlessly. When Dr. Martinez refused without Frank's permission, they threatened legal action. They're claiming Frank isn't mentally competent to make decisions about Apollo. That's ridiculous, Sarah protested. Rita says he's completely lucid. I know, but they're creating a complicated legal situation. They're on their way to the hospital now to try to prevent today's visit. Sarah felt a surge of protective anger. We need to warn Rita. But the warning came too late. Within the hour, Rita called in tears. They've convinced the hospital administration to postpone Frank's outing pending a competency evaluation. He's devastated, Sarah. I've never seen him so upset. The day that should have brought clarity instead brought more confusion and heartache. By afternoon, word of the dispute had somehow reached local media. Sarah's phone began ringing with calls from reporters seeking comment on what was being framed as a custody battle over the viral rescue dog. "This is getting out of hand," Sarah told Jessica when she stopped by after her shift. "It's not about viral videos or legal claims. It's about what's best for Apollo and Mr. Thompson. And your family," Jessica added gently. "You've become part of this too." While they were talking, Ethan had taken Emma into the backyard to play with Apollo. Through the window, Sarah watched as her son carefully supported his sister while she petted the dog. Apollo remained patient and protective, positioning himself so that Emma wouldn't lose her balance. "I need to document this," Sarah said suddenly, grabbing her phone. "If the Hendersons are trying to claim Mr. Thompson isn't competent, we need to show that Apollo is thriving here and that this arrangement is working for everyone." She recorded several minutes of the children with Apollo, capturing their natural interaction and the dog's gentle attentiveness, especially toward Emma. When the baby began to fuss, Apollo immediately nudged Ethan, as if reminding him that his sister needed attention. Sarah posted the video to her previously quiet social media account with a simple caption, "Apollo helping Ethan watch his sister. This is what healing looks like." Within hours, the video had thousands of shares. Comments poured in supporting the bond between Apollo and the children, many questioning why anyone would disrupt such a beautiful connection. The tide of public opinion was turning against the unknown Hendersons before they'd even had a chance to present their side. By evening, Rita called with an update that brought mixed emotions. The hospital administration has reversed their decision after reviewing Frank's medical records. He's been cleared for a brief visit tomorrow, but the Hendersons aren't backing down. They've hired an attorney. As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had evolved into something far more complex, with emotional stakes she hadn't anticipated when she first stopped to help an injured dog. Through her bedroom window, she could see the nearly full moon casting silver light across the backyard. Apollo lay at the foot of Ethan's bed, his chosen sleeping spot since joining their household. Tomorrow would bring the long-awaited meeting with Frank Thompson, a man whose presence had shaped their lives despite his physical absence. Sarah wondered what he would be like, this retired music teacher who had trained Apollo so beautifully, who had lost his wife and found companionship in a German shepherd with soulful eyes. She wondered what solution they might find together, facing the unexpected complication of the Hendersons' claims. As she drifted towards sleep, Sarah thought about the strange paths that had led them all to this point. An injured dog, a curious baby, a hospitalized man, a viral video, and now distant relatives with questionable motives. Whatever happened next would require courage, compassion, and perhaps most importantly, the wisdom to recognize what truly mattered beyond legal documents and blood relations. The morning of Frank Thompson's visit dawned clear and bright, a welcome contrast to the cloud of uncertainty hanging over Sarah's household. She'd been awake since dawn, tidying the already clean living room and checking Apollo's appearance, making sure his coat was brushed and his new collar, a gift from the veterinary clinic staff, was properly adjusted. "You want to look your best for Mr. Thompson, don't you?" she murmured, rubbing the spot behind Apollo's ears that always made his eyes close in contentment. The dog leaned against her leg, solid and reassuring. Ethan watched this preparation with solemn attention, sensing the importance of the day ahead. "Is Mr. Thompson going to take Apollo away?" he asked, the question Sarah had been dreading. She sat beside her son on the couch, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know, sweetheart. Apollo belongs to Mr. Thompson. He's loved him for many years, much longer than we've known him. But Mr. Thompson wants what's best for Apollo, just like we do." But Apollo loves Emma," Ethan insisted, as if this simple fact should resolve everything. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang, Rita calling with an update. "We're leaving the hospital now. Frank is tired but determined. The staff wanted him to use a wheelchair, but he insisted on his walker, says he wants to appear as capable as possible." "How is he handling the situation with the Hendersons?" Sarah asked, moving to the kitchen where Ethan couldn't overhear. "He's filed a formal statement with hospital administration, asserting his mental competence and rejecting their claim to Apollo. His doctor has fully supported this. But the Hendersons aren't giving up easily. Their lawyer contacted the hospital this morning." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Will this affect today's visit?" "No, everything's proceeding as planned. Frank is adamant about meeting you and seeing Apollo. He says this visit isn't about legal matters. It's about finding the right path forward for everyone." After ending the call, Sarah checked on Emma, who was napping peacefully in her crib. The baby had slept soundly through the night, a rare occurrence that Sarah attributed to Apollo's calming presence. So many aspects of their lives had improved since the German Shepherd's arrival. Ethan's confidence, Emma's sleep patterns, even Sarah's own stress levels despite the current situation. At precisely 2 o'clock, a hospital transport van pulled into Sarah's driveway. Apollo, who had been dozing in the living room, immediately raised his head, his attention fixed on the front door with an intensity that suggested he somehow knew who was arriving. Sarah opened the door as Rita helped a thin, elderly man navigate the porch steps with his walker. Frank Thompson was taller than Sarah had expected, though now stooped with age and recent illness. His white hair was neatly combed, and he wore pressed slacks and a button-down shirt that hung loosely on his diminished frame. But it was his eyes that captured Sarah's attention, bright blue and alert, filled with a quiet dignity that commanded respect. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice stronger than his appearance suggested. "I can't tell you what this means to me." "Would you please call me Sarah," she replied, stepping aside to let them enter. "And it's an honor to meet you, Mr. Thompson." "Frank," he corrected with a gentle smile. "After all you've done for Apollo, I think we're well beyond formalities." As they moved into the living room, Apollo remained frozen in place, his eyes fixed on Frank with an expression that seemed to contain a universe of emotion. For a moment, no one spoke, allowing dog and master their silent reunion. Then, Apollo moved forward, slowly. At first, then with gathering momentum until he reached Frank's side. The dog didn't jump or bark. Instead, he pressed his body against the elderly man's legs with such tenderness that tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. Frank lowered one hand to Apollo's head, his fingers trembling slightly. "Hello, old friend," he whispered. "I've missed you terribly." Rita discreetly helped Frank to the armchair where he could sit with Apollo at his feet. The dog never took his eyes off his master, his tail sweeping slowly back and forth across the carpet. "He looks wonderful," Frank said, examining Apollo with a practiced eye. "You've taken excellent care of him, Sarah." "He's been no trouble at all," she assured him. "In fact, he's been a blessing to our family." As if on cue, Emma's babbling came through the baby monitor. "That would be my daughter waking from her nap," Sarah explained. "Would you like to meet her? She and Apollo have formed quite a bond." Frank's eyes lit up. "I've seen the pictures, but yes, I'd love to meet the little one who charmed my Apollo." Sarah brought Emma downstairs and Ethan, emerged from his room where he'd been waiting nervously. The boy approached Frank with unusual shyness, standing half hidden behind Sarah until Frank addressed him directly. "You must be Ethan," the elderly man said warmly. "Rita tells me you've been reading to Apollo. That's very kind of you. He always enjoyed when I read aloud in the evenings." This simple acknowledgement was all it took for Ethan to step forward. "He likes my dinosaur books the best," the boy offered, "especially the one about T-Rex." "Is that so?" Frank smiled. At home, his favorite was The Call of the Wild. Perhaps he enjoys adventure stories. While they talked, Emma squirmed in Sarah's arms, reaching toward Apollo with determined focus. Sarah carefully placed her on the floor near the dog, and everyone watched as the baby crawled directly to Apollo, patting his side with familiar affection. Apollo looked to Frank, as if seeking permission, before gently nuzzling the baby's cheek. Emma giggled, grabbing for his ear with uncoordinated fingers. "Remarkable," Frank murmured. "In all our years of therapy work, I've never seen him form such an immediate attachment to a child." Sarah sat across from Frank, feeling strangely nervous. "He's been like Emma's guardian since the day we found him. It's almost as if they were meant to find each other," Frank finished, his expression thoughtful. "I've always believed Apollo has a wisdom beyond ordinary dogs. Margaret, my late wife, used to say he had an old soul." For the next hour, they shared stories about Apollo. Frank described how he'd adopted him as a puppy after his retirement, how they'd trained together for therapy work, and the joy Apollo had brought to countless children in the hospital. Sarah recounted the day they found him, his recovery, and the small ways he'd changed their lives for the better. As they talked, Apollo moved between them, occasionally resting his head on Frank's knee before returning to his position near Emma, as if physically connecting the two families. Finally, Frank addressed the subject they'd been circling. "I understand my cousins have created quite a situation," he said, his tone hardening slightly. "I want to apologize for that. Patricia and Robert have always been difficult, but I never expected them to go this far." "You don't need to apologize," Sarah assured him. "But I am curious. Why are they so interested in Apollo?" Frank sighed. "Apollo comes from a distinguished bloodline of working German shepherds. His grandfather was a decorated police dog, and several of his siblings have gone on to service work. Despite his age, he's valuable for breeding purposes. Patricia and Robert have asked about him many times over the years, always with breeding in mind, rather than companionship." "But Apollo is 8 years old," Rita interjected. "Isn't that too old for breeding?" "For responsible breeders, yes," Frank agreed. "But I suspect they're not concerned with responsible practices. They likely want to capitalize on his pedigree while they can. They've recently experienced financial difficulties. Their move to Arizona is less about retirement and more about escaping creditors, from what I understand." The revelation cast the Hendersons' motives in an even darker light. Sarah thought about Apollo's gentle nature, his patience with her children, and felt a surge of protectiveness. The idea of him being used for profit in his golden years was deeply troubling. "What can we do?" she asked. Frank leaned forward, his expression resolute. "I've already taken steps. This morning, I signed papers officially transferring Apollo's ownership. My lawyer has filed the documentation and contacted the American Kennel Club to update his registration." Sarah held her breath, unsure what this meant for her family's growing attachment to Apollo. "If you're willing," Frank continued, his eyes meeting Sarah's, "I'd like to transfer ownership to you, Sarah. Legally, the Hendersons would have no claim on Apollo if he belongs to you rather than me." The offer stunned her. "Frank, Apollo means so much to you. I couldn't possibly—" "Please, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not giving Apollo up entirely. What I'm proposing is a shared arrangement. Legally, Apollo would belong to you, protecting him from my cousin's claims. But in practice, we would share his care and his time. Share, Sarah repeated, trying to understand. Frank nodded. My recovery will take months, and even afterward, I won't be as mobile as I once was, but eventually I'll be in an assisted, living community that welcomes pets. Apollo could split his time, perhaps weekdays with your family, where he can be active and engage with the children, and weekends with me, where he can have quieter time. The creative solution caught Sarah off guard. It wasn't what she had expected, either a painful goodbye or a complete adoption. Instead, Frank was offering a middle path that honored all the connections Apollo had formed. It's an unusual arrangement, Frank acknowledged, but Apollo has created an unusual situation by bringing our lives together. Rita has agreed to help with transportation until I'm mobile again. It's the perfect solution, Rita added. Apollo gets to keep everyone he loves in his life, and Frank gets peace of mind knowing Apollo is with a family who adores him when he can't provide the active care Apollo needs. Sarah looked at Apollo, who was now lying beside Emma as she played with blocks on the floor. Ethan had settled next to them, one hand resting casually on the dog's back. The scene embodied the natural integration that had already occurred, making the decision seem obvious. I think it's a wonderful idea, Sarah said finally. If you're truly comfortable with it, we would be honored to share Apollo with you. The relief on Frank's face was palpable. There's one more thing, he added. I'd like to contribute to Apollo's expenses. I've set up a small fund for his food, veterinary care, and other needs. That's not necessary, Sarah began, but Frank held up a hand. Please, it would mean a great deal to me, and perhaps when I'm stronger, I could occasionally watch the children with Apollo. I was a teacher. For over 30 years, children have always been my joy. The idea of her children having a grandfather figure in their lives, something they'd lacked since moving to Portland, touched Sarah deeply. What had begun as a rescue was evolving into an extended family connection that none of them had anticipated. As Frank prepared to leave, visibly tired but with a newfound peace in his expression, he asked for a moment alone with Apollo. Sarah led everyone else to the kitchen, giving them privacy for their goodbye, temporary though it was. Through the doorway, she glimpsed Frank leaning forward in his chair, speaking softly to Apollo, who sat attentively before him, their eyes locked in silent communication. The bond between them was tangible, a testament to years of companionship that couldn't be severed by circumstance or distance. Thank you, Frank said earnestly when they returned, for stopping when others walked by, for opening your home and your heart. Some might call it chance that Emma spotted Apollo that day, but I believe it was something more meaningful. After they left, with promises of regular updates and visits, Sarah sat in the suddenly quiet living room with Apollo at her feet. The dog seemed content, as if he understood the arrangement that had been made and approved of it. Ethan joined them, leaning against Sarah's side. Does this mean Apollo can stay with us forever? Not quite forever, Sarah explained. He'll stay with us most of the time, but he'll also spend time with Mr. Thompson. They need each other too. Ethan considered this. Like when I visit Dad in California sometimes, but my real home is here with you. Something like that, Sarah agreed, touched by her son's understanding. Apollo has enough love for all of us. In the weeks that followed, the unusual arrangement flourished. The Hendersons' claim was dismissed when presented with the legal transfer of ownership, and they retreated to Arizona without further protest. Frank's health improved steadily with the motivation of regular visits from Apollo and his new extended family. Apollo thrived in his dual role, weekday guardian to Emma and companion to Ethan, weekend comfort to Frank, who began teaching Ethan piano during their Visits. The local media, initially drawn to the story for its viral appeal, now followed up with a feature on intergenerational connections and creative family structures. On a warm Sunday afternoon 2 months later, Sarah sat in Frank's new apartment at the assisted living community, watching as he played a simple melody on the upright piano with Ethan beside him on the bench. Apollo lay at their feet, while Emma crawled on a blanket nearby, occasionally pulling herself up using Apollo's stable form for support. "He's going to be walking soon," Frank observed, nodding toward Emma's determined efforts. "Apollo is an excellent support system," Sarah smiled, thinking of how much had changed since that ordinary morning when Emma had spotted something beneath the debris that the rest of the world had walked past. One small moment of attention had rippled outward, creating connections that none of them could have foreseen. Outside the window, maple trees cast dappled shadows across the community garden, where residents tended flowers and vegetables. Life continued its imperfect, beautiful unfolding, not always according to plan, but sometimes offering unexpected harmonies that were richer than any single note could produce alone. Apollo raised his head, looking first at Emma, then at Frank and Ethan, and finally at Sarah, his soulful eyes reflecting the same message he'd conveyed from the beginning, that some bonds transcend circumstance, that family can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the capacity to care is never truly exhausted, only waiting to be awakened by those who need it most. As Frank began teaching Ethan a new song, the notes rising and falling in the sunlit room, Sarah realized that what had begun as a rescue had become something far more profound. A reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as inconveniences, that compassion creates its own kind of magic, and that the simple choice to stop and notice can change not just one life, but many. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah, Emma, Ethan, Frank, and Apollo's journey has touched your heart. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful connections in life come from unexpected moments of compassion. For more emotionally captivating stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking the link on your left. If this tale of healing and new beginnings moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human and animal connections. What unexpected encounter has changed your life? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest gifts come from simply stopping to notice what others pass by.